There we go.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Sorry about that, everybody. Just one not hit button on this board. All right? One button not pressed on this board, and nothing works. Okay, let's start over again. Wednesday. Thank you. Welcome to Safety Works. For Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. From the border of liberty and prosperity and the highway to the north. How you doing out there? It's a new month. We're 70 days away, I guess, from the end of this COVID-19 emergency. All right, on May 11th. So what do we got? Well, basically when you're listening to this, it'll be 70 days, depending on how you want to count and where you are. How's everybody doing out there? We're going to need to go right to our commentary, right up front, and then we're going to handle the news. In case you're not familiar, this is Safety Wars. I'm Jim Polzel. We've been coming up on Season 3 next week for this whole thing. We're going to have, hopefully this weekend I could get around to editing some videos from last Friday's International Conference on Climate Change. So I think it's important for us to advance questions that haven't been answered in this whole climate change debate. Like, are the policies that are proposed going to actually impact climate change? Do we have enough resources out there for the whole electric grid? Do we have enough capacity in the electric grid? Yesterday, I read a story about the highest demand trade, right? And the trades are hurting. Right? The manual labor trades, the skilled trades, the unskilled trades, everything out there. The electricians are going to be in high demand. And that's the forecast, one forecast I'm looking at. So I guess electrical safety is going to be a big issue too. Because you see a lot of people out there doing stuff that they probably should not be doing. Today I was driving around and someone had a aerial and boom lift, articulating boom lift. They parked it overnight on the street, and they put the basket with it right next to the power lines. Not a very good thing. It's a bad thing. BAD. So, we're going to entitle this, Getting Out in Front of the Problem. You're going to say, well, what does that mean, getting out in front of the problem? Let's say you have a problem, right? You want to be ahead of the games. I think we're all familiar with the phrase, if you're not, you will be right now. The truth, a lie gets around the world 3 times while the truth is still getting out of bed. How do you like that? What does that mean? We're all about building capacity. And I think I mentioned this before. I had a problem at the beginning of my career doing accident investigations. And until you get the knack of it, accident incident investigations, because I always focus on preventing things and managing things up front. And what I learned eventually, it took years to find this out. When you have an accident, when you have a problem, it could be any kind of problem, you want to be ahead of the problem. Same thing with OSHA, right? With things. When you have an accident, you want to have enough capacity built in your system So you're ready for the unthinkable. So, for example, and I mentioned this book one time before. There's it's almost a classic book now. It's been out for about 15, 16 years. The Unthinkable by an author, Amanda Ridley. One of my favorite books. Who lives and who dies in disasters? And she goes into a whole bunch, and this is before the Station nightclub fire, I believe, where up in Rhode Island, where a lot of people died at a Whitesnake concert. What do you do to make an emergency more survivable? And you have to have this in your mind. You're creating capacity in yourself. You don't want to think about it, but you gotta, okay, well, how am I going to get out of this building if it's on fire? How am I going to get off this plane if it crashes? We have an emergency. I play the hotel game with when my kids were younger, and we still do. We're in a hotel. Okay, where's the exits? Let's take a tour of the hotel. Let's see what's going on. Where's our meeting location? You may do this in your house, and I recommend it. If we have an emergency, where do we go? Right, we have to evacuate the house. The same thing goes in the workplace. You have an emergency action plan that should be part of your overall health and safety plan. If you have a mobile crew, or if you're visiting a facility, you have a site-specific training, site-specific health and safety plan. In the event of emergency, we go to location 1. If we can't make it there, we go to location 2. You don't go across the street to Starbucks or down the street to Starbucks, and then we don't know where the hell you are. All right? That's a really important thing. Now, accident investigations. You want to be out in front of the accident investigation. You do not want somebody else to be managing your accident investigation. So I had one client many years ago, one client not so many years ago. I said, look, I could give you a health and safety professional on site to go and do accident investigations, accident management, but more importantly, prevent accidents. Right? That's what our focus is going to be. In the event of an accident, we're able to manage it. And I have a whole program out there. And again, programs are made to fail, right? Eventually, a program is going to fail, but it's not if, not when, if you listen to Todd Conklin's podcast today. And, no, we're going to let the insurance company handle it. And you don't want to do that. Well, let the insurance company handle it. So you want to be in control of this. So what do you think they ended up doing? They let the insurance company handle it. And of course, the insurance company is going to write it in favor of what the insurance company is for. That's what the focus is going to be. And at the end of the year, when they went for their workers' comp renewal, they were looking at like a $3 million bill, and they ended up having to fold the company because they let the insurance company come out, and insurance investigators come out for every accident. Right. And of course, the workers' comp, they wanted that kind of money up front, and the company decided to fold at that point. Not so long ago, we had another client who had an accident on site and just did not know that they were supposed to do an accident investigation. They said, okay, well, we'll let other people handle the accident investigation. And what do you think happened? How do you think that turned out? OSHA got involved. They came to the job site. It was catastrophic loss. A couple of days later, now OSHA was writing the accident report, and they put it out. They said, well, where's your accident report? Well, you didn't have one. Okay, let's do our own investigation. They ended up, it did not end well. We'll leave it at that. It did not end well. So what do you do? And it's all in the record keeping section of OSHA. And there's a handout there. If you go on the OSHA website and you look under injury and illness record keeping forms, they have the OSHA 300, OSHA 300A, right, and the OSHA Form 301 Injury and Illness Incident Report. So, and I'll just read right from it. This injury and illness incident report is one of the first forms you must fill out when a recordable injury, work-related injury or illness has occurred. Together with the log of work-related injuries and illnesses and the accompanying summary, these forms help the employer to develop a picture of the extent and severity of work-related incidents. Within 7 calendar days after you receive information that a recordable work-related injury or illness has occurred, you must fill out this form or an equivalent. So often a lot of companies have their own accident investigation forms, right? But this is the minimum. And there's some arguments for using just the OSHA 301 form versus your own accident investigation form. I have a tendency of using both when I'm running the show because you fill out the OSHA form. They can never ever argue that you did not do the investigation if you fill out their form. And then I have other notes and other reports and everything, especially if it's a catastrophic injury or big injury or something that I know is going to probably end up in court or something like that. I have a big investigation that we do, and it's a real investigation. So, we talk, and I talk often about the one-pagers. What's a one-pager? It's a one-page accident investigation form. And the investigation, and that's what a lot of companies, they expect from their health and safety person. We're going to do a one-pager. And you got that accident investigation form done within by the close of business or sooner. And here OSHA says, look, you have up to 7 calendar days to do this right here, right in the investigation. Right? And you have to keep the form on file for 5 years following the year to which it pertains. Right, so you have 1 week to do this. I don't suggest you wait till 6.5 days to pick this thing up, bad boy up, and start filling it out. So you do it as soon as possible, but realize that if especially if you're dealing with a complex incident, it may take more than a week to do the accident investigation. And this is the other thing. The OSHA 300 log is what I call a running form or a rolling record form, meaning you have to, if you have an accident in January and an accident in March, that's recordable. And then we'll get into what that is in a minute. And then going onward, they have one in October. And then, you're planning on filling out this form in January before it's due, and you have to put it on file. We all know that stuff, right? If you do that, and if you don't do that and you think you're going to have a file folder with a bunch of Post-it notes in it, OSHA comes to a site for an thing. What's the first thing that they ask for? They're going to ask for the OSHA Form 300 and at least the last 3 years of the OSHA 300 forms. And you better have them in file, and you better be able to produce them. That's getting ahead of the curve if you have that, right? If you have that, we get the form, you have it on file, right? I encourage people to put it, that it's supposed to be posted, and you have a clear file envelope. You put it in, and you have it hanging. And this way, if OSHA shows up, guess what? It's right there on the wall. Keep the last 3 years right on the wall. Right? This way, it's there. You don't have to go looking for it or anything. It's immediately there. Or one of my clients has all this paperwork in a binder right at the front desk. OSHA comes in. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Here's the form. You produce it on the spot. But this is a rolling form. So if something happens in January, you better make sure you put it in for January for that. You're going to keep this log going in because it's a log of work related. The log would indicate it's a running, like, Star Trek Captain's log. You keep going on and on. Now, let me back up here. What is an OSHA recordable on here? So, first thing you have to do is when is an injury, and I'm reading right off the form. This is like the Luther's small catechism. They ask you questions and they give you answers, right? When is an injury or illness considered a work-related? An injury or illness is considered work-related if an event or exposure in the work environment caused or contributed to the condition or significantly aggravated a pre-existing condition. Work-relatedness is resumed for injuries and illnesses resulting from events or exposures occurring in the workplace unless an exception specifically applies. So this is all contained in 29 CFR Part 1904.5. Which work-related injuries and illnesses should you record? The obvious one: death, loss of consciousness, days away from work, restricted work activity or job transfer, or medical treatment beyond first aid. And this is a very high end. We're doing 1,000-mile in orbit look down on this thing. There are different criteria, if you're not sure, give us a call, 845-269-5772. So and I'll announce this now, what we're doing now is, if you have a health and safety question, give us a call, and we will consult with you over the phone. Not for free. So you have a question, and there we get to know you, everything else. We're in there. I did this for the first time this week, where I had someone call in with some questions. I said, you know what? Give me your Venmo. Here's my Venmo account. Pay me, and you got me for X number of hours. Right? And we took care of it. Right? What are the additional criteria? Right? You have to include needle stick injuries, medical removals, a TB infection, or a hearing test issue. Right? What is medical treatment? That means a visit to a doctor or healthcare professional solely for observation. Right? Medical treatments include managing and caring for a patient for the purpose of combating disease or disorder. The following are not considered medical treatments and are not recordable: medical observation, diagnostic, or first aid. What's first aid? Using non-prescription drugs at non-prescription strength. So if someone tells you take 8 ibuprofen, that's not a non-prescription strength, right? Administering tetanus immunizations, cleaning, flushing, or soaking wounds on the skin surface, using a wound covering or steri-strip or butterfly bandage, using hot or cold therapy, using a totally non-rigid means of support, using a temporary immobilization device while transporting a accident victim, drilling a fingernail or toenail to relieve pressure or draining fluids from blisters, eye patches, a simple irrigation or cotton swab, right? Foreign bodies, to remove foreign bodies not embedded in or adhered to the eye, using irrigation tweezers, cotton swab, or other simple means to remove splinters or foreign material from the eyes from the areas other than the eyes, using finger guards, using massages, I like that one, and drinking fluids to relieve heat stress. All right, so now those are first aids, but this gets a little bit more. And then how do you decide if the case involved is restricted work, right? You would have that. And now, under what circumstances should you not enter the employee's name on the OSHA form? Again, we have HIPAA laws. However, they don't necessarily apply to workplace stuff, except for this, unless otherwise specified, right? You must consider the following types of injuries or illnesses to be privacy concerns: an injury or illness to an intimate body part or to the reproductive system. This actually happened at a company I was working with, and I'll mention the guy's name, Chuck Webster. We were worried about this one for an hour, and what happened was he had a human resources handler, where a woman got burned in a private area sitting on the toilet because the cleaner did not remove a cleaning solution from the toilet seat when they were cleaning. So what do we do here? She got burned in an intimate area. We had the human resources handle it at that point. And if another female handled the situation, and on the OSHA 300 log, that didn't go on the OSHA 300 log. An injury or illness resulting from a sexual assault. So here's one for you. Are workplace violence incidents OSHA recordables? You better believe they are, right? A mental illness, a case of HIV, hepatitis, or tuberculosis, a needle stick injury or a cut from a sharp object that is contaminated with blood or other potentially infectious material, or other illnesses if the employee independently and voluntarily requests that his or her name not be entered in the log. Now, I would get that one in writing, right? Because don't be like another company that's named after a large river in South America that got cited for this several times. You want to make sure on record keeping issues. And then let's remember something, right? Can these logs be revised? Yeah, they get revised all the time. Are things a first aid case and don't end up on the log? And then 2 months later, it turns out that they needed medical treatment? Yeah, that happens. Absolutely. How about if it goes the other way, where you believe that this is a work-related illness, you put it on the log, and then 2 months later, it turns out that this was a pre-existing medical condition that had nothing to do with work. It wasn't aggravated by situations at work or anything like that. Yeah, you could update the log. You put a line through it, initial it, and maybe a letter of explanation in there. This is a personal medical issue, right? You could revise these logs. Actually, if there's a revision in the log, you better have some documentation. But the other thing is, OSHA, right? They're going to look on that. Well, hey, you're on the ball with this sort of thing. But this is where a lot of companies foul up, is specifically on this. And another thing is this: things could happen years later, right? That might end up having to be on the log. So. And then you're required to, file this, electronically. Oh, certain employers are. Now, calculating injury and illness incident rates. All right. Now, generally speaking, if you're under 10 employees, you do not have to fill this out, but check the regulation and everything else and how it applies to you. It's like the IRS, right? You have to figure out, the IRS is never going to tell you what taxes you have to pay. But if there's a problem, you bet your rear end they're going to, with that, they have to do an evaluation. So page 2 of this, right, is calculating the injury and illness incident rate. Normally, this is required on a lot of projects, capital projects, state projects, federal projects. And you need to go and get with your human resources on your payroll, where you have to figure out how many hours are worked by all the employees. Right? And with that really the payroll people are really the only people that you could measure this with. So if you're an hourly wage earner, easy to calculate relatively. It may be laborious, but it's relatively easy to calculate. However, let's say that you are salaried. That's where you run into issues. Salaried workers, and no, you're required to keep an accurate timesheet for time, but some salaried workers may, work more than this. 50 to 100, 50 to 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week. Right? So what goes on the log, right? Whatever number you're giving it, employee name, job title, date of injury, where the event occurred, describe the parts of the body, parts of the body affected, and the object or substance that directly injured or made the person ill. Then the next thing is step 3, classify the case. Is it a death, days away from work, job restriction, other recordable? And step 4 and 5, days away from work. And then step 5, is an injury, skin disorder, and what type of illness and everything else. Now, then you have your summary sheet, where you're going to have the OSHA's Form 300A. That is mandatory, and you have to fill out and know who it is, what's your NAICS number, employment information, all different types of stuff in here that you could use with that. Now, the injury and illness incident report. So let's get back to that. Now we took a diversion on 300 and 300A, now Form 301. So I always fill this out like this, because what's OSHA going to say? They can't complete, you're filling out their form, right? May add extra forms and everything else. And I fill out also the my own incident report, which is probably a lot longer than this, and it's much more detailed, because I'm always thinking litigation, and there are other things that are required in there that are not on this form. So if you think, now, to satisfy OSHA requirements, I would use this form, but I would also have all the other forms out there. So what's the information? What's the name, address, date of birth, date hired, gender, they may have to update that with the way things are nowadays. Name a physician or other healthcare professional. If treatment was given away from the work site, where was it given? Was the employee treated in an emergency room, hospitalized overnight as an inpatient? So let's say there are certain things you have to report. If your employee is hospitalized overnight as an inpatient, you have 24 hours from the time of the injury to report it to OSHA at 1-800-321-OSHA, and expect a visit from OSHA. They don't always investigate, but expect a visit. And by the way, when you dial 1-800-321-OSHA, they're going to be asking you these questions. So I don't know if they have a checklist, and this is the part of the checklist or not. I don't know that, but they're going to ask you all of these questions, or at least most of them. And if you don't do that, that's a citation. They're going to cite you for that one, right? That's why it's important to record, if you can. I mean, if you have the wherewithal to do it, when an employee gets hurt, my first question, what it is, are they okay, blah, blah, blah. What time did this happen? And I write that down so I don't forget it. The case number from the log, the date of injury or illness, the time the employee began the work, the time of the event, and what was the employee doing just before the incident occurred? What happened? What was the injury or illness? What object or substance directly harmed the employee? And if the employee died, when did the death occur? And by the way, OSHA will help you filling this out. So that's what you gotta be ahead of it. So getting back to the theme, you have to be ahead of everything. If you're a safety professional, you don't have this stuff, you don't have your groove note together, you're going to have a problem. Because this should be one of those things. Part of the, how do I do an accident investigation? Certain employers, and I got into this with well-known companies, all right, we wanted the report done by the end of the day. And when I hear that today, I break this out. Number one, OSHA does require it for 7 days. If you want a preliminary report, I'll give you a preliminary report. That's not a problem at all. But if you want, if you want a report that's going to be irrelevant, where you can't get to the bottom of what exactly happened, we can't develop, like Brent Sutton says, a learning team. We can't do that. You can't do that by the end of the day. We could give you a preliminary report and just put a disclaimer on there. Hey, things may change. We're still doing the investigation. We could do. But don't expect the final report in there. And if a manager is asking you to put out, a final report by the end of the day, you're going to have a problem. And I know it's already happened to me where people I found out years later, what the actually happened, and I was being lied to all over the place on what the reports on what actually happened after things have been litigated and everything else. Oh, you want to hear what really happened? This is what really happened. It might have had something to do with the outcome of the case. I don't know. So anyway, it's very, be out ahead. Now, what happens if you don't do the accident investigation right away? I don't mean not within a week. You're going to rely on someone else. Someone else gets to control that narrative on what happened. That's a problem. So, for example, OSHA has the multi-employer policy. All right, I wasn't planning on talking about this. Hold on. Let me, as usual, I get off on a tangent and I go in here and I do this. So we have the OSHA multi-employer policy here. All right. And let me get out the directive. Hold on. Here. You have different roles. I know this by heart. However, I don't want to make a mistake because I don't want to make a mistake. Okay, so let's say you're on a construction job, or you're coming in to do some type of maintenance. You're a contractor doing maintenance. So this is right off of directive number CPL 2-0.124, all the way back from 1999. So here we have, for a multi-employer, and I'm just going to have select texts in here. On a multi-employer work site in all industry sectors, more than one employer may be citable for a hazardous condition that violates the OSHA standard. A two-step process must be followed in determining whether more than one employer is to be cited. Step number one. The first step is to determine whether the employer is creating, exposing, correcting, or controlling them, or a controlling employer. Right? Step two is if the employer falls into one of these categories, it has obligations with respect to OSHA requirements. Step two is to determine if the employer's actions were sufficient to meet those obligations. So you have a couple of things here. You have what is called the creating employer. That is the employer that caused a hazardous condition that violates an OSHA standard. Right? That's the creating employer. Employers must not create violative conditions. An employer that does so is citable even if the only employee exposed are those of other employers at the site. Okay, and you also have what is called the exposing employer. That's an employer whose own employees are exposed to the hazard, right? So they're your employees you're exposing, right? Then you have the correcting employer, an employer who is engaged in a common undertaking on the same work site as the exposing employer and is responsible for correcting the hazard, right? This usually occurs where an employer is given the responsibility of installing and or maintaining particular safety or health equipment or devices. And you have the controlling employer. That's an employer. This is where normally a general contractor is, right? An employer has a general supervisory authority, or I should say construction or environmental management firm or real estate management firm. An employer who has general supervisory authority over the worksite, including power to correct safety and health violations itself or require others to correct them. Control can be established. Again, get everything in writing. Control can be established by contract. Very important. Or in the absence of explicit contractual provisions by the exercise of control in practice. Right? Descriptions and examples of different kinds of controlling, right? Employers are on the site, and it gives examples. So, getting back to the accident investigation. It's important that if you're the employer, right, you're going to be the exposing employer, right, for what we just said. You get out and you do the investigation. If you cannot do that, hire somebody like me, 845-269-5772 or jim@safetywards.com. You get with us with this, and we go and we do the accident investigation. Because the worst thing that you want to do is to have another one of these roles, right? The creating employer, the correcting employer, or someone, or the the exposing, the correct, all these other things, the creating, right? And all these other contractors getting involved, all these other people, because guess how that accident report is going to end up? Any idea? How do you think that's going to end up? That's going to end up, it's not our fault. It's not our fault. This is what happens. And what are they going to do? They're going to, shove it where the sun doesn't shine. Right? On you. And guess what? It's always going to be your fault. This way, if you report it to OSHA, when you're supposed to report it to OSHA, if it's required, if you're showing you're taking initiative, you're out there trying to correct the problem, all of a sudden, and you have, and this is where the advantage of having a preliminary report by close of business is, you're ahead of the game here. You're ahead of the game on this. You get to control that. And in the really, really bad situations, or maybe you have to go, it's a newsworthy thing, you got to go in front of the press, something like that. You want to be able to be in control of the narrative. This is what happened. Because the worst thing you want to do is to give that to somebody else, and then they're in control. They're in control and may not work out for you. You don't want another contractor to do the accident investigations for you. You do not want another contractor or the government to do the investigation, because I tell you what, who are they going to ask? They're going to ask everybody else, and they're going to come up with the darndest things sometimes. Not intentionally, not because they're evil, not because there's a conspiracy against you, nothing for like that, but because, hey, witnesses are going to pan things in certain ways. That all being said, let's say that the employee gives you all of this information, right? You have witness statements, you have a narrative, everybody signs off on the form, and maybe some companies are now recording everything, right? Everything's on record, right? Everything's on record, everything's on video. And then all of a sudden they tell OSHA something else. Guess what? Under the general duty clause, they have to cooperate with any investigation promulgated under the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Right? Now, you have the other situation. They tell you one thing, tell another employer another thing, and the other person, right? Have them sign and we go into what that is. And you have somebody else go out there, and they tell them, this person another thing. They tell OSHA another thing. Let's say that this goes for litigation. Let's say this all goes for litigation. Well, you tell this guy one thing, this guy another thing, and this guy another thing. Which one is it? That happens all the time on this. Happens repeatedly. They go to court and they tell them something else. Again, you have to be out in front. Right? I'll bang on the table today. You have to be out in front on all of this stuff and take initiative on this. Have your groove node together on this. Believe me, it helps on this. And what ends up happening is, the first couple of times it's going to be rough. I'm going to tell anyone who says this is easy has never done this before. This is not easy. This is from, again, decades of practice doing accident investigations with this stuff. So that's what you end up having to do. Get out there in front with this. So anyway, that's all I have to say with this, is be out in front. If you need a hand, give us a call. I'm going to take a break. I went for 40 minutes without a break here. Wow. So let's hit the right button here.
In the professional safety community, communication and planning are just a few keys to your program's success. The question many practitioners have is, where do I start? Dr. Jay Allen, the creator of the Safety FM platform and host of the Rated R Safety Show, has built a global foundation to help you along the way. Go to safetyfm.com and listen to some of the industry's best and most involved professionals, including Blaine Hoffman with the Safety Pro, Sam Goodman with the Hop Nerd, Sheldon Primus with the Safety Consultant, Jim Pozell with Safety Wars, Emily Elrod with Unapologetically Bold, and many others. As individuals, we can do great things, but as a team, we become amazing. Dial into safetyfm.com today and surround yourself with a powerful force of knowledge and support.
OSHA recordables, first aid cases, catastrophic losses. You want answers? So do I. This is Jim Pozell with Safety Wars. Now, let me add one more thing to this discussion here. All right? All about this getting out there with the narrative and everything else. With everything, right? But let's not forget something. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to the press. Have someone else talk to the press. Have a press person talk to the press. That's a special expertise, number one. Number two, when you're talking to an investigator, an OSHA investigator, or anyone from the government, you have Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent, right? On all of this stuff. You have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And once you get law enforcement investigating things, I would suggest you talk to your attorney. And have your attorney handle things, right? I think Bruce Will. Why did I say Bruce Willis? Not Bruce Willis. It's Alec Baldwin is probably gonna regret being so open with everybody and not keeping his mouth shut. To be quite honest with you, so you have. All right. So work right. You have a right to remain silent. You do not have to necessarily cooperate and answer questions if you do any question you don't want to on this. And that now, due to my understanding, I'm not an attorney. My understanding is that based on recent Supreme Court rulings, you have to assert that right. I mean, you have to say, I'm taking the Fifth Amendment, pleading the Fifth, or however you want to talk about. So that's basically what I'm going to tell you to do is, with that. Now, on the other hand, you cannot prevent an employee from talking to OSHA on that, right? You can't do that. So work through your, have a plan in place. That's what the whole idea is. Be prepared ahead of time. Add capacity in your system with everything. with that, we give a course on this, on statement analysis. We actually give a course on this as part of our accident investigation stuff that we go over with management. I'm actually going to be presenting it next week with a client with this on how to handle the OSHA stuff with that, an investigation. Okay. So you're probably going to want to download this and play it for your coworkers or any interested parties on this. All right. OSHA did not have any updated press releases today for March, right? On there, at least that time of this broadcast. So, some stuff in the Department of Labor. This is from Washington. U.S. Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh issued the following statement on President Biden's announcement on his intent to nominate Julie Su as the next Secretary of Labor. I am grateful to President Biden for announcing his intent to nominate my dear friend and colleague, Deputy Secretary Julie Su, to succeed me as U.S. Secretary of Labor. Julie has been a true partner in leading the Department of Labor, and her drive and vision have been central to everything. This is from U.S. Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh. Have been central to everything we have achieved in the past 2 years. As Deputy Secretary, Julie's achievements, prioritizing rights, protections of the most vulnerable workers, driving our equity work to attract a diverse world-class talent into public service, modernizing workforce development and unemployment insurance systems, and deepening our engagement with state and local governments have been broad and deep. She's a lifelong champion of America's workers, and I have the utmost confidence in her ability to sustain the work of the department and advance the president's vision of an economy that puts workers first and leaves no one behind. U.S. Department of Labor announces $48 million in funding available to support pre-release job training services for incarcerated people. I'm going to tell you this, and I've done training for formerly incarcerated people. You want to talk about people who get taken advantage of in every way possible? As people who are trying to straighten out their life and they get out of prison. They have an astronomical, I believe it was NBC 2 years ago, came out with a report on this, that the things that they had to go through. So most likely they're going to be in a non-union construction job, residential, right? Because they're not eligible to get a lot of, let's say, in the oil industry. If they've recently been released, they may not be able to go and be eligible for security clearances or for background checks. So they get really, they're working for companies that really, they're not nice jobs. They're construction jobs, right? Maybe fast food workers. Guess what? Maybe Dollar General, right? With this stuff, or other, I shouldn't have said it, but any other things where they have huge OSHA issues, or there is no safety program, and they get put at risk. That's why a lot of folks in that situation end up to be entrepreneurs, because no one wants to hire them. So that's good to be, training these folks. That's an absolute need. I mean, they paid their dues to society. Just let them work. Give them some dignity to work here, right? Find something meaningful, hopefully. U.S. Department of Labor finds Mississippi Medical Center illegally deducted hours worked, failed to pay required overtime, and recovers $201K in back wages. And this is from a healthcare facility in Ruleville, Missouri, where they automatically deducted a 30-minute lunch break from some employees' hours without making sure that they were free of work-related tasks and able to take breaks. So this sounds like people working through breaks. This is what this says. Some of the facilities' nurses need to work through lunch breaks, and they were not getting paid for them. 110 workers, $201,436. So let's see, how much is that? I can't do that in my head because I cannot broadcast and do math in my head at the same time. So 201, 436 divided by 110 equals, so $1,831 and change for each employee. Wow. That adds up. U.S. Department of Labor to host one-day online educational seminar for agricultural industry employers. So it's on March 7th, and you got to register to attend. Check your DOL listings here. The website is right on the website. So I decided, we're going to, we're doing the, with the rail disaster here, right? I decided to go onto the NTSB website, and because they have news releases too on things, so it's probably worth it going in there. So here we have NTSB opens a public docket for a train derailment in Virginia. And this is from yesterday. The NTSB opened up the public docket Tuesday for its ongoing investigation into the 2021 derailment of a Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority train in Arlington, Virginia. The docket for this investigation includes more than 1,400 pages of factual information, including reports on operations and going on and on. It does not provide the final report or a probable cause. The NTSB will issue a final report at a later date that include analysis, findings, recommendations, and probable cause determined. So going on to what we just discussed on OSHA record keeping and accident investigations, well, here's the government. This has gone on for over a year and a half, right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's a good thing they're doing a thorough investigation here. But your employer is going to say, well, do it by the close of business, have it all back. Well, sometimes you might be able to do that. No, if it's a little boo-boo, then you have to put it in the big book of boo-boos like Doc McStuffins. Maybe you could do that, but you can't do that with this. I know, you weren't expecting the Doc McStuffins, right? Anyway, I clicked on the docket, and wow, there's a lot of stuff here, right? Towing vessel pilot never reported hitting a bridge in Louisiana. A Louisiana barge towing vessel struck and damaged a bridge in 2021, but the vessel's pilot never reported it to authorities. In the early morning hours of December 23rd, 2021, a vessel was pushing 6 hopper barges on the intercoastal waterway to New Orleans when the pilot lost control of the tow. While navigating the channel, the 676-foot-long tow began to swing to port. That means the left, all right? Right? Versus the starboard, which is the right? The left of the boat, port. All right? When the pilot realized the tow was not positioned well, he put the engines in reverse. The tow then struck the bridge. He did not know the tow, nor did he know. The pilot told investigators he initially did not see the bridge, nor did he know they struck the bridge. The track, blah, 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 and the tow was there. Photo was not from the time of the strike. Okay, going on and on and on. When the tow struck the bridge, water, electrical, and gas lines along the bridge ruptured, triggering alarms at the utility providers. Workers sent to the investigate found the bridge damaged and reported it to the U.S. Coast Guard. Video from a forward-looking camera on the ship captured a vehicle passing over the bridge with visible lights before the contact. What time did this happen? Early morning hours. Okay, so probably dark. Right? When the tow struck the bridge, whatever, blah, blah, blah. According to NTSB investigators, based on the investigation, it is apparent the pilot was aware the tow hit the bridge, but he did not report the striking to the relief captain or to the Coast Guard. Federal regulations require the operator of the vessel involved in an unintended bridge strike to immediately notify the nearest U.S. Coast Guard office. The bridge, which does not cross a navigable waterway, was closed to traffic following the content, and the repairs of the bridge were estimated at $2 million. What was the root cause? Probable cause? Lost control. Yeah, you think? So this bridge was way out of the channel, it appears to be. And there is no freaking way that anybody, this thing would have went underneath it. So, according to the picture, wow, they really whacked this bridge. Wow. Lack of spotter leads to crane toppling off barge. This is from February 16th of this year. A crane toppled off a Virginia barge last year because no spotter was present to notice the crane being driven too far aft. That means right in the back. And the cable system securing the crane to the barge failed. So this is one that I see a lot, right? As in the marine industry, they put mobile equipment, either an excavator, a backhoe, a crane, on a barge. And that's supposed to be secured down so it can't move. And then what happens is, I even saw boom lifts, which is, like, by the way, against the rule book, against the instruction manual. And then what happens? Someone's not paying attention, or the load shifts, and what do you think happens? Thing falls off. Right? The 320-ton crane. Oh, I know where this is, right? I've been across this bridge. While working on the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel expansion project near Norfolk on February 8th, 2022, an onboard crawler crane fell off the construction barge and into the bay. The crane was later recovered and declared an insurance loss of nearly $2 million. There were no injuries when an oil sheen was visible on the water. The 320-ton crane was secured to the barge using a centerline cable that allowed the crane to move back and forth. The system, required by OSHA, was intended to prevent the crane from moving laterally or rolling off the barge. The NTSB investigators found that as the crane moved toward the stern preparing for lift, the centerline's cable aft eye had opened and became disconnected from the aft deck bracket. And they have visuals here. So when the cable became dislodged, right, causing the cable system to fail, allowing the crane to travel too far aft. And the investigation found that a stronger centerline cable system, one in line with OSHA regs, would have prevented the crane from being driven off the barge. And this is another one too, right? Company's policy required the spotter be used anytime the crane is traveling, but there was no spotter present. The NTSB found that the company did not know workers were not following its policy because they did not have processes in place to ensure workers were complying. Wow. And you know what? End of the program. I'll see you tomorrow. I got all wrapped up in things. Good night.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.